Hey there, Rebel Babies. I've got a really cool interview for you today. If you listen to this podcast, you have probably noticed that I am the lone wine person so far. And since, that's what I do, I thought I would poke some of my favorite people in wine. And today I've got one of my big heroes, Eric Texier. Is a vigneron in the south of France. He's known for being kind of an early leader in not just better practices in the vineyard, and going beyond just the, adoption of biodynamics, which had this major heyday in France, which is cool and awesome. But Eric he went on a journey to kind of figure out how his soils could be improved and how that could improve wine quality and also sort of build in some resilience to what he hopes to be able to do with his family in the future. So Eric, he's a native to Bordeaux. He didn't come from a wine family, which is kind of uncommon, actually, in France. It's really hard to buy a vineyard in France. And so it helps a lot to be born into it. He was actually a nuclear engineer. And surprise, surprise, he wanted to do something else. And had fallen in love with wine. And so he's a sort of self-made winemaker and very opinionated, not afraid to sort of stoke the fire, if you will, and call out people on their bullshit. He's super fun to talk to. His wines are incredibly expressive, and he, like not a lot of other people that I know in the wine community, has a genuine humility about his process and his life in wine. I think he has benefited a lot from not being steeped in this sort of assumption that he knows everything. And I really enjoyed talking to him. So we go into his vineyards, we go into his winemaking, we certainly talk about the terroirs and what the regenerative practices that he's incorporating are meaning for the work that he does. And I can't wait to share this with you. He's an awesome person, kind of a kick-ass rock climber, also mountain climber, and I highly recommend looking for his wines. They're actually really sort of accessibly priced, I think, for the quality especially, and they're pretty widely available through Louis Dressner selections if you are looking for them. So I definitely encourage you to give them a try if you ever see them. And without further delay, I'll hand it over to Farmer Jesse and a word from our sponsors before we get into the interview with Eric Texier.
Today's episode of the No-Till Market Garden podcast is brought to you by Johnny's Selected Seeds. Johnny's Selected Seeds is a proud sponsor of the No-Till Market Garden podcast. Since 1973, Johnny's has supported farmers and gardeners with superior seeds, tools, and information to help ensure their growing success and help feed their communities and families. The research farm is at the heart of Johnny's, where they trial thousands of varieties and tools every year. Their breeding program uniquely focuses on introducing varieties that meet the needs or solve the challenges mixed market, small farmers, and avid gardeners face. Visit johnnyseeds.com for innovative new varieties and time-tested favorites to grow this season. You can also browse their online growers library, link in the description, for a wealth of free educational resources. The employee owners at Johnny's look forward to growing with you. Today's episode is also brought to you by RIMOL Greenhouses.
Whether it's tomatoes to market, flowers in the spring, or your family's harvest, growing in a greenhouse protected from the weather provides the right environment that you need for a harvest that you can count on. RIMOL Greenhouses are designed for durability and offer the quality that you need to grow productively year-round. Visit RIMOLGreenhouses.com to get a quote today.
If I may editorialize for a second, I own a RIMOL tunnel. I love it. We built it ourselves, and I really appreciated the quality of the tunnel as well as the customer service we received in the process. So make sure to check them out. All right, enjoy the show.
Eric, thank you so much for joining me today. It's really a pleasure to have you on, and you're in the middle of crush and harvest, and so I really appreciate you taking the time today.
No, it's nice to see you again.
So just because most of the listeners won't know very much about your region. Can you tell us where you are in the world and how many hectare or acres you farm and which varieties you work with?
So, my vineyards are located on both sides of the Rhône River, right in the middle of the Rhône Valley, which means the closest towns are Valence or Montélimar. It's halfway between Lyon and Marseille, so southeast of France. And so I have a vineyard in Brezem, which is a very tiny little place, quite unknown compared to Côte-Rôtie, Cornas, or Hermitage. And I also so this is the east bank of the Rhône. And I also have vineyards on the west bank of the Rhône in Ardèche, in a place called Saint-Julien-Saint-Alban. So in total, I work with 12 hectares, which is probably something like 30 acres.
30 acres, yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. And I grow quite a few varietals. The main ones are typical of the Northern Rhône, so Syrah for the reds, and Roussanne for the whites. But I also have, especially in Ardèche, I also have some Southern Rhône varietals like Grenache, Cinsault, Clairette, a bit of Counoise, and we'll talk about that later. But I'm also working with very old, totally unknown varietals that used to be grown in Ardèche, around the phylloxera, and they mostly disappeared between the two wars. Mm-hmm. And the names are, again, totally unknown, like Ex-Braya, Pougnier, Bruiscou, Ribier Gris, Ribier Noir. So old varietals that nobody's growing anymore.
Yeah. And are you planting those, or did you inherit them with your?
No. They were totally gone.
Yeah.
For years. And the only place where they still have them is the Conservatoire de Vassal near Montpellier, where they had a few vines of them, sometimes only one vine. And I started grafting them, in 2020, I would say. Yeah, it was right during the COVID shutdown. So that was 2020.
It was a great time to get out and do some experiments.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So yes, I've been grafting them for a few years. So I have no vineyards yet. The plan is to be able to release the first wines 10 years from now.
It's very exciting. And what is it that made you want to bring some of those back?
Global warming.
We'll talk about that and some of the work that you're doing in the vineyard to try to mitigate for climate change. You're very much planning for the future, it seems like.
Yeah.
So just to kind of go back to the beginning of your journey, you weren't born to a wine family. And so maybe you could tell us a little bit about how you came to wine, and also about how you came to the way of farming that you practice.
So I came to wine mostly as a wine lover. So I would say drinking and partying. And I grew up in Bordeaux in a family where drinking wine was kind of mandatory. So in a way, I started to enjoy drinking wine when I was like a teenager. Then I moved to Lyon to study. And I was also rock climbing.
Yes, you're quite a rock climber in your past, right?
Yeah. And so, rock climbing around Lyon means that you go in places where they make wine. So the closest place where I could really have like nice rocks was Solutré, which is right in the middle of the Puy-Fissé area. So we would climb during the day and drink at night, of course. And so I discovered all these wines that I had no idea they were existing when I was in Bordeaux, like Puy-Fissé, of course, Beaujolais, Savoie, Cornas, so all the Northern Rhone. And then further south, I discovered the wines from Les Baux de Provence, any wines from Provence. And I was kind of fascinated by the variety of wine that I could find, the different expression of terroir, the different tradition that they had, the different grapes. So slowly, I became like a geek, so that was only 15 years later that I decided that I had to change my life. I was working as an engineer.
A nuclear engineer, right?
Yeah, yeah. I was working for the nuclear French industry. And, all these corporate things, meetings, that was not my thing. So after a few years, I decided that I had to go outside, to do something on my own and to be outside. And since I was really passionate about wine, I chose wine.
And if I'm correct, you started working with Jean-Marie at Verger, correct? Was that you?
Yes. Among others.
Mm-hmm. And did you seek him out because of his... I mean, he's a bit of a rebel.
Yes.
Did you seek that out, or do you feel like you kind of fell into that and that influenced you in some way? Because you have also done things in a fairly, I guess, non-traditional way. Even though I think of you as a traditionalist when it comes to technique and sort of preserving the cultural heritage of wine, you've also not been afraid to do things differently, I guess, than your peers.
Yeah, so doing things differently back then, you had many options, in fact. So I went to work with Jean-Marie for one of my internships, mostly because he was kind of a very traditional winemaker, meaning he was not using any yeast addition, was not using any enological tricks that were already coming kind of hard in the eastern part of France. That was already the case for Bordeaux, for sure, maybe for Champagne, but Burgundy, Beaujolais, the Rhône were kind of a part of this trend. But still, there were people, enologists, pushing farmers to make wine with all the, the big technological means and adding microbes and filtration whatsoever.
Enzymes.
So Jean-Marie, excuse me.
Enzymes, all the things.
Enzymes, of course. It was the very beginning of enzymes and bacteria. Jean-Marie was totally against that. He was very much terroir-driven in his mind. And since terroir was still the very big thing for me in wine, I had the idea that Jean-Marie would be a good call for practicing terroir-driven winemaking.
Definitely.
So as you can notice, I'm not talking about vineyards.
Mm-hmm.
So I went for 6 months with Jean-Marie, mostly for winemaking and mostly for white winemaking. He was a very good master. I think I owe him quite a bit in terms of winemaking. But also at the same time, so that was 93. I interned with the very old traditional farmers, especially one, René Dondin, also in Mâcon, who was one of these unique people. He was kind of an anarchist farmer, I would say. He was in his 80s back in 93. I think he started making his first wine right before the Second World War.
Wow.
And he was insanely natural. I mean, yeah, way before the trend. So with him, I discovered alternative ways to work the vines, to work the soil. I also discovered a man who was not 100% a winemaker, a vine grower. He had also cows. He was producing vegetables. Well, he was kind of a genius about farming. And not only extremely traditional farming, because again, he began between the wars. So a time where, nobody had a tractor.
Nobody had anything.
No, yeah. All the pesticides, herbicides were not part of the picture. And he stayed that way. So when I met him in the 90s, he had a tractor that he was not really using in the vineyards, by the way. And he would not use any kind of chemicals whatsoever or pesticides except sulfur and copper. And in a very smart way. So René was a huge step into a very different approach of vine growing and soil management, though he wouldn't use these words.
Right.
Okay. For him, it was more just being a farmer.
Yeah. Taking care of the
place. Yes. Absolutely.
How fortunate to have had those be your first influences in farming. Did you intentionally seek those people out, or was that just a happy accident?
Honestly, partially yes, partially no. Well, for Jean-Marie, it was really intentional. For René, it was a different story. Well, of course, I had in my mind that there was no way I could go out, find some vines, go out in the vineyards and spray tons of shit just to make tons of grapes. No, for sure not. Then, honestly, I had no idea he was so deeply into, how can I say that? Trying to find a better balance between everything he was doing outside. Not only vines, not only soil, but also cows, also everything. So he was a very special man. And honestly, when I first met him, I had no idea that was so deep. So it was partially intentional, but then I discovered the whole world. I had no idea it would exist. It was still existing. No idea. For sure.
And Jean-Marie at Verger, one of the things that really struck me about him when I met him for the first time was how his breaking with tradition was really more about not making the assumption that certain terroirs should be valued above others, and that, the traditions of winemaking should really be kept as low intervention as possible. But there are these terroirs out there that really deserve, possibly a little more attention and accolade than they've been given in the past. And maybe it's just about, either how they're grown or how the wines are made. And it seems like you have also done that in your career, especially in Brezem. And I wonder if you could talk about how you have this sort of dualism to your personality, where you are very, very concerned with the traditions of both growing and winemaking and the cultural heritage around wine, but also that there are these terroirs that you have rediscovered or helped rediscover. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what land means to you, what the terroirs mean to you, especially Brezem, where you farm your own vines and where you live. Correct? You live near your plot in Brezem?
Not anymore.
Oh.
I'm an old man, and now it's my son Martin who is in charge with all the vineyards. So he lives there, and I'm back in the Beaujolais where I have all my friends. So I live like 1 hour and a half away from Brezem now. But yes, so back to Jean-Marie. Yes, definitely, you pointed it out. I realized that he was making an insanely good wine back then. It was the Puligny-Montrachet, a place called Sous le Puy. Was one of these late ripening Puligny terroir that nobody would care about, and especially back then. Now everybody cares about everything in Puligny-Montrachet, of course, but back then, no. And yes, I enjoyed very much seeing Jean-Marie treating Sous le Puy as if it was Le Montrachet itself.
Mm-hmm.
And he was extremely careful about this specific terroir, because he had in mind that these late ripening places would be soon probably the best places, even 25 years ago. So in a way, yeah, it was still possible back in the 90s to find land in Côte-Rôtie or in Cornas, but it was more intellectually for me, and also practically, it was more challenging to go to Brezem and to try to make wine again there, where almost nobody was making wine, especially on the slopes. It was only one guy, old guy, same generation than René Dondin. François Pouchoulin was still making wine there. And there was another producer who was making wine, not on the slopes, not on the proper Brezem terroir. So first I read a lot. Old books, the literature about wine is amazing, like thousands of books, especially written around the phylloxera crisis.
Yeah.
So it was quite easy to find a very good indication about what was grown where, what was the type of wine they had. Again, I was trained in Burgundy, so limestone had a specific, taste for me. Mm. So not realizing that Brezem was the only one of the very few limestone terroirs in the Northern Rhone was kind of appealing. And to achieve something, to try to get something that would be a Burgundian way of growing vines and making wine that could apply to the Northern Rhone, which was totally impossible in Côte-Rôtie or in Cornas.
Mm-hmm.
And so, just hiking there many times, different time of the year, smelling the air, I don't know, feeling the ground under your feet. There was something special there.
Yeah.
I cannot explain with words, probably, but I felt great in Brezem. I had the feeling that it was, yes, a good place for me. You know, the limestone, you have like a boxwood smell, specific smell on limestone that you never find on granite or schist or. So I had the feeling that Brezem could be a great place. Same feelings than in the Mâconnais, same plants, very similar, except that it was the Rhône and not Burgundy. So probably a bit warmer, but not that much. A huge influence from the Alps.
Mm-hmm.
So extremely cold winter. Well, very cold winter, colder than Burgundy. Dry, hot summer, hotter than Burgundy.
Cold nights, though, right?
Very cool nights, yes, especially during harvest. We can easily have frost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so and also history and traditions, because Brezem has been a place where they used to make great wines, especially white wines, until the phylloxera. So history was kind of solid, and yeah, there was no Roussanne left on the slopes, and I knew that 150 years ago it was full of Roussanne everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Tradition too. They were doing, in the Rhône very often, northern Rhône very often, you blend Roussanne and Marsanne. It's very unusual to make a 100% Roussanne, but Brezem was 100% Roussanne, and they were doing long aging, a bit of oxidative style. This was very appealing to me.
Mm-hmm.
So the terroir, the tradition, which is also part of the terroir in my mind, this old guy, Poussoulin, who was still around and had tons of history to tell about Brezem. No one else was also good for me. I was looking for a place where I could be on my own. So yeah, Brezem was a very good choice, I think. And well,
yeah,
I'm pleased.
I'm pleased too. And so you were making, you're making Chardonnay with Jean-Marie, and then you end up in Brezem and you're working with Roussanne, and those are very different, but the way that the way that your wines speak is very much with the same sort of energy. And how much of that do you think is about, the style of winemaking that you employ, and how much of that is about the way that you farm?
No, I would say that in my mind, winemaking is kind of, well, in French we said it's surfait, which means that it's almost nothing.
It's not important. Yeah.
No, I don't think so. All these people raving about wines because they are made in amphora or whatsoever.
Right. The accoutrement.
I don't believe in all these things. No, Roussanne in Brezem, I would say 99% it's the terroir. Mm-hmm. Because I have Roussanne on the other side of the Rhône, so in Ardèche, on granite, and it's a totally different story. And I don't see any potential for making great terroir-driven wine in Ardèche with Roussanne the way I feel it, or I see it, or maybe I make it in Brezem. So this is all about the terroir. Mm-hmm. On the other side, we tried to grow clairette in Brezem, and no, it's not working. Mm-hmm. The other bank, the granite, it's much better.
It's better.
It's much better. So yes, I would say winemaking has almost nothing to do with the result. As soon as you don't get faulty wines, I think winemaking is just to avoid faulty wines.
Yes, it's stewardship.
Yeah.
Let's get into some of the things that you do differently in the vineyard than maybe some of your peers.
Well, this is a long process that started. First, I started farming in 2001.
Mm-hmm.
So I made wine for 3 years without working in the vineyard. I was just buying the grapes. 2001 was the first vintage where I started to farm in Brezem. And so there were two things very important for me. The first one was I didn't want to use any kind of herbicides or pesticides that would be harmful to me or others, or everything that was alive in the area. So that was the first step. Stop using Roundup. Roundup was used on the vines that I took over. Was used under the rows only, and there was like a wild cover crop between the rows.
Mm-hmm.
That was plowed usually in May, 1 year out of 2 or 3, to let the cover crop coming back and established again. But the Roundup was used, yes, under the rows. So that was, for me, no. I didn't want to use it. So instead of weeding chemically, I started to weed under the rows by traditional means, which is intercept.
Mm-hmm.
That René Dondin was using in the Mâconnais behind a horse, and I was using it behind a tractor.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first step. So beginning of the 2000 years in the Northern Rhone, there was almost no one practicing mechanical weeding, except on the very, very steep slopes where it was done by hand,
mm-hmm.
because it was impossible to do otherwise. And then the second thing that I noticed for my 2 first vintage in Brezem is that I had some Brettanomyces problems, and only from one spot. And this spot, for me, I had the feeling that something was not in balance.
You thought it was coming from the vineyard.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
yeah. And from the soil, in fact, because the vineyards was quite in good shape.
Mm-hmm.
Vines were old, but in good shape, well trained. I mean, the old man who was working these vines was doing a very decent job in terms of pruning, ébourgeonnage. But the soil was behaving strangely, like some years you would, like 2000, you would have like, you could feel that the soil was extremely powerful, releasing quite a lot of things to the vines and a bit too much.
Too vigorous.
And yes, too much vigor and too much energy in a way, something weird. And especially during the May and June. And some years like 98, it was the exact opposite, with low rainfall during the summertime. Vines were under hydric stress. You could see that they were not growing anymore after mid-July.
Mm-hmm.
They had a hard time ripening correctly, which was weird. You can expect that. I mean, in my mind, I could expect that if soil was poor and conditions were hard for the vines, but it was obviously not the case. So why this kind of strange behavior? So I started to work on cover crop. So getting rid of the wild, if the word is okay, a wild cover crop or unseeded cover crop.
Just what came up. Yep.
Yes. So at least one row out of two, and seeding on the other row.
Mm-hmm.
And so seeding a blend of one legume, one grain, and usually a radish or a beetroot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like a big root. Okay,
something with a long taproot
that are able to decompose fast with quite a big input of organic manure.
Mm-hmm.
So first year we did Févrole. I don't know the name in English. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
It's kind of a faba.
Yeah, a legume.
Not, yeah, it's used mostly for animals.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Cowpeas.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. Then rye,
mm-hmm.
and like a white long radish.
Yeah, like a tillage radish or something.
Yeah, very similar to daikon radish.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can now. You froze for a second, but we're good now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Yeah.
Oh, there you are. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I started to do that in 2001. And after a while, so I would say, 2002 was difficult to measure the difference with 2001, but 2003 was a very specific year. As you probably know, in France, it was the first year where we had like a very, very hot summer.
Yeah.
Yeah, no rain, and a very early season.
Mm-hmm.
We started to harvest around the 20th of August.
Wow.
And we ended. I think we were done picking at the end of August.
That was a standout year, because in 2009, is that what we're talking about? Yeah. 2003.
No, that was 3. This is 3.
That was
I'm talking about
first
3.
Really hot vintage too. It was weird.
Yeah, okay. I think it was the start of the signs of a climate change for us. Huh?
Mm-hmm.
And I did great in 2003. The vines were in good shape. I had no hydric stress. I harvested with leaves on the vines, which was totally unusual. I also harvested in Côte-Rôtie, a place where I was buying grapes, and we had no more leaves. Huh? So it was around the 25th of August, and the vines were like in winter, only with the bunches still hanging. Yeah. It was like a nightmare. And yes, I did great in 2003 in Brezem. The vines were in very good shape. The wood was one of the problems that we had to face in 2003, that we didn't get what we call outage. So I don't know what's that in English. It means that the woods turn from green to brown, brownish.
Yeah, they ripen. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and in 2003, the problem was that even after harvest, the woods were still green.
Interesting.
They were not going for outage, and some vines had the trouble being pruned in 2004. So I gave all the credit of this very good behavior of my Brezem vines in 2003 to what we started to do in the vines 2001 by seeding a cover crop that was probably taking the extra strength of the soil in years where we needed to get out this extra strength, but also keeping all the energy in the years where it was good to keep the energy inside.
Yeah.
So I did that starting in 2004. I started to seed cover crop in all my vineyards, and not 50% of the surface, but all the surface. So this was really something quite unique in the Northern Rhone back then.
Yeah.
You could find people doing this kind of thing in Languedoc, Alsace, of course.
Yeah.
They were ahead of that. Probably other places that I don't know, but in very monoculture oriented places like the Northern Rhone, I felt alone for quite a few years.
Yeah.
Doing this kind of thing. And then in 2009, I started to grow vines on granite on the other bank of the Rhone. And I had to start it again to find the good cover crop because what I was using in Brezem was not doing super fine in Saint-Julien. Altitude is not the same. It's drier. I started also seeding cover crop in Saint-Julien, and since then, 2001 on the Vieille Vigne in Brezem, 2004 in all my vineyards in Brezem, and 2009 in Saint-Julien-Saint-Alban, I have not used any kind of compost or external input in the vines.
You're just cover cropping.
Yeah, that's it. I don't need anything else. And we are doing yields around the translation in tons per acre is not like super easy.
It's okay. You can use hectoliters.
Well, yeah, we do roughly 45 hectoliter per hectare.
Oh, that's pretty good.
It's not bad, huh? Without any input. I mean,
yeah,
except 50 kilos of seeds a year.
So you will renew your cover crop every year. You put in a new one.
Yes, not necessarily every year, depending. But with the very early starting growing season now, we are having a hard time leaving the cover crop going to seed. 2021 was super easy. It was extremely late. We had I think first time we had to really go into the vineyard to do some work on the vines. It was really the beginning of May. So at least the legume was already almost in seeds. But years like this year, no way. I mean, we had to. So we roll the cover crop down as soon as we have to go in the vineyard to work. And this year we had to do it early April.
Oh, wow. Do you use a Rollifaca for that? Or,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And for the listeners in the United States, it's like a roller crimper, basically, but a narrow one for vine rows. And then do you seed directly into that?
Yeah. Well, if we can.
And it just depends on the year and how much moisture.
Yeah, depending on the soil and how hard is the soil. Typically right now.
Yeah.
So this year is absolutely okay because we had rain, quite a bit of rain starting at the end of August. So just for harvest, we had 6 inches of rain during 2 weeks. So on a 2 weeks period, we had 6 inches. For the past 9 months, we had 3 inches.
Wow.
Total. Okay. So
Got to catch it when it falls.
from January to the end of August, we had 3 inches of rain.
Wow.
And so we had 6 inches on a 2-week period time, end of August. So now the soils are quite soft, and it will be no problem to seed direct.
Mm-hmm.
But 2020, 2019, the soil is
very hard.
It's absolutely impossible to seed direct.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still using, you call it a seeder or a seeding machine?
Yeah.
I'm still using one that has no disc.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
Maybe using a one that has discs could help direct seeding in a very hard soil. I don't know. I never had the opportunity to test it. So when it's really too hard, like it was in 20, we had to do a light plowing on the top. Yeah.
Yeah. Those seeders are expensive. It's difficult to, just try one out because the cost of admission is so high, but they do work well. I use one, and it's nice. And it does work if the soil is very dry, but they're very expensive. And sometimes the only way to make it work is if you can share one, because something like that you only use once a year. But it sounds like most years you can, as long as you time it with the rain. So are you trying to get your seeding done during harvest a lot of years, or are you doing it right before or right after?
I'm still trying, especially with the drought we have to face almost every year now. I'm changing varietals that I'm seeding. So we are going towards things that I haven't been using before, especially on the granite side. And they need to be seeded by the end of August.
Mm-hmm. So right before, when you're kind of waiting for harvest to start. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. But most of the time it's still super dry. So the soil is still quite hard to direct seed.
Mm-hmm.
And also what we noticed, so it's 500 meters of altitude roughly in Ardèche, mostly on granite, decomposed granite. We've noticed that direct seeding is not necessarily the best option on some soils. We have better results by doing like a super light plowing, like 2 inches deep before seeding, to have better germination of the seeds later. But again, this is changing super fast.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you noticed that, but I mean, the behavior of the cover crop has changed like crazy since 2009. We have almost changed 100% of what we are seeding. I mean, if it goes on that fast, I'm going to be tired before we could find solutions.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see.
You have to be very nimble anymore to be able to keep up with how quickly things are changing, for sure.
Today's episode of the No-Till Market Garden podcast is brought to you by Tilth Soil. This Cleveland, Ohio-based company is producing some of the highest quality potting mixes out there. One of the biggest lessons I learned in farming is the importance of good seed starting mixes, and that's why I included Tilth Soil in my book and have been using their seed starting mix, Sprout, on my farm since 2020. Tilth Soil produces potting mixes approved for use in organic operations like our own. Their living soil is made with fully composted food waste they collect and process themselves. Whether you need a cubic yard super sack once a year or ongoing deliveries for your year-round operation, Tilth has you covered. The team at Tilth can help with shipping, coordination, and provide ongoing support throughout the growing season. To learn more, visit www.tilthsoil.com. That's tilthsoil.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Real Organic Project. Does your farm deserve to be recognized for all the hard work done on behalf of the environment and your community? Real Organic Project is an add-on certification that partners with 1,000 plus certified organic farms across North America, including my own farm, Rough Draft Farmstead. Available at no cost to farmers and with minimal time commitment, it is a great way to differentiate your farm from mass-marketed corporate organic where hydroponic production and animal confinement are still commonplace. Real Organic Project is a whole farm certification program to distinguish crops grown in healthy soils and livestock raised humanely on pasture. As a farmer-led movement, we know many hands make for quick work. I hope you will lend yours by signing up for Real Organic Project certification today. Visit realorganicproject.org/no-till to apply. That's realorganicproject.org/no-till to apply. All right, back to the show.
How much do you think the success of your cover crops and what you have to do to get them established is about the relative health of the soil to begin with? And
it's of course we didn't talk about that, but cover crop is more if you have a soil that is still trying to find its balance and to recover from previous chemical weeding. If you don't have the right microbes, then cover crop is more a pain than a help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For the vines and for the soil. So, of course, the start is to get back life into the soil before cover crop begin to be effective.
Yeah.
So for this, we've been using very old things that I learned from René Donnin so back in the 90s, but this was techniques that they've been using for centuries. It's what we call compost liquid.
Mm-hmm.
So in fact, it's just so how can I say that?
It's the stuff that comes out of the compost pile.
The thing is not exactly. It's you use like a normal compost at first, but you use it as a base to multiply a shitload of microbes.
Yes, you ferment it basically. You make a big
exactly.
fermentation.
Yeah,
I do that too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so you it's a fermentation with a lot of aeration. It has to be around 38 Celsius,
mm-hmm.
so probably around 100 Fahrenheit, something like this, mm-hmm. maybe a little lower. And so that is So the idea behind that is to get
it's like inoculating.
Microbes,
yeah.
Yeah. A microbe party.
Mm-hmm. It is a party.
Can spray, then you can spray back in on the soil, whatever the soil is for. And usually I would say that for me, if I start from a 100% chemically weeded soil, we do this for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And then we start to introduce cover crop. We start, the legume, we start right away.
Yeah.
Very often. And 1 year out of 2, we do the legume and then something like rye.
Mm-hmm.
That is also very powerful in terms of microbes.
Mm-hmm.
And we do the compost liquid almost every year for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And then once we get fungus and bacteria back into the soil, that decomposition is fast enough that you don't see the woods from pruning from 1 year out of the, you know what I mean?
Yeah, they break down faster. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Usually you don't see them the year after.
Right. And are you burning your wood like they do?
No.
That's how we do it too. We cut it up and leave it in
exactly.
the vine row. Yeah,
in small pieces. Yeah. What we do is we do like a mulch
flail.
With the wood. Yes. And yes, as soon I noticed that the good indicator for us is If it takes less than a year for the wood of pruning, the pruning wood, to decompose and to be totally impossible to find in the vineyard, then the activity, the microbes activity of the soil is strong enough so the cover crop is going to be efficient for the vines. It's not going to be a weight for the soil or for the vines.
Yeah.
Something like this.
I also think it's always a very good sign when your wood is breaking down that you have a strong fungal population, because they are the best at breaking down that lignin.
Of course.
Yeah. So when you have your vineyards and you have gotten your cover crops kind of figured out and things are really working, do you feel like you can see the difference, especially I would think in terms of when you get a big amount of rain like you just did, you're holding on to more of that than people who don't have the same amount of organic material in their soil. And do your neighbors notice that? Have other people seen what you're doing and sort of started to recognize that maybe given how volatile the climate is becoming and how many droughts we're experiencing, that holding on to that water is pretty important?
I'm not sure, that we live in times where rational evidences are not proof of anything anymore.
It's fake news. Yeah.
So, I mean, all the people who want to be convinced will definitely ask me questions. Maybe they might ask for help. But all the people who are still not convinced that they should do different, they don't give a shit.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing is, well, of course, if you can sell the bottles for a good price, if people are more open to new ideas, if they are not struggling. But when they are struggling, and a lot of people in France growing vines are still struggling, they will go on using, they are talking about allowing irrigation for AOCs.
I heard that. That's shocking.
So but again, I'm not complaining. I am complaining when it's the big chateau in Bordeaux.
Mm-hmm.
Because they have tons of means, they have all the money that they need to go on a different way. But when a guy has to work 50 hectares of vines in the Côte du Rhône alone, to make just not even a decent living,
barely making it.
It's probably not time yet for them to say, okay, I'm going to do cover crop instead of Roundup.
I'm going to change everything. And I think it's really fascinating. So I've heard that they're talking about allowing some irrigation, and this at the same time as not allowing for people to consider changing varieties, perhaps in Burgundy or the trellis system, which could be designed in a way that would allow for better farming techniques. So it's interesting that some of the regulations around these very strong traditions in France are also going to change a little bit as we move into the future, and which choices are made will very much determine, I think, what people choose to do in their vineyards. And do you try to get involved in any way in influencing how that all plays out?
So the answer of the question is no.
Okay, fair enough.
And why no? It's just because something that is a huge part of the equation in France now is the young generation. And believe me, the young generation is not going to water their vineyards. No way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, philosophically, they are highly trained kids. They chose to be farmers, and not only in wine. Huh? They chose to be farmers because it's a choice for their life, not only for their income. And they have very different views than the cisgender white males that are in charge with the AOC right now, typically like me. So the young generation is not at all in all this shit. Huh? Mm-hmm. Kids like my kids, they make wine. They never use AOCs.
Mm-hmm. So you feel like that generation is the hope for the future? And
of course. Of course, they are much more clever than my generation. They don't care about AOCs because AOCs right now are just a huge mess. Mm-hmm. It used to be something extremely, but it's not anymore, except, of course, if you are in Burgundy on the top terroir. But otherwise, you can ask for a Syrah from the Northern Rhone in Vin de France, you can ask the exact same price than in Cornas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You just have to make the good wine at the good place with the good farming. And if you are from this generation, it's not a problem to do the communication around it. It's not a problem to speak 3 different languages. And it's not a problem to take the train to Amsterdam because they don't fly anymore. And to explain to all the kids in Amsterdam or in Copenhagen that what they are doing doesn't need the AOC on it. So I think the irrigation for the AOC, again, we are back on the people who are struggling, or they absolutely need to do like 90 hectoliters an hectare to make just a decent living. So they need the irrigation. Mm-hmm. In a way. Yeah. I don't know where they will get the water from, by the way.
I don't either.
Nobody knows. But for sure, it's only these people who are into this. Mm-hmm. So I think it's useless for a guy like me to go in this kind of organization and to say, people, be careful. We need this water for something else. Don't use it to make crappy wine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nobody's going to listen. And the people in charge with the future, they are these young kids. And, my daughter, Alice, she makes wine only from Cinsault in the Northern Rhone. Mm-hmm. There was no Cinsault in the Northern Rhone 10 years ago. She doesn't use Syrah. They are beyond that. Cinsault is doing much better under dry conditions and hot conditions than Syrah. Mm-hmm. Much, much better. And so they decided to grow Cinsault, Counoise, no Syrah. Well, too bad.
Yeah. How refreshing to have a generation that uses common sense.
Oh, amazing. They are amazing. They are pushing me in ways or on trails that I would never explore before. Mm-hmm. So I'm quite confident that all these decisions like okay, you can water your vineyards in AOC. It's just the last kind of signs that a very old system is going to die, and it's still a little bit alive.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's the end. It's the end.
No, I agree. And I find it so frustrating. This is true in America, and irrigation isn't regulated here, but it should be. It is, but you can irrigate your vineyards. It's not disallowed. But one thing that I often think about when it comes to what we could be doing right now, and one of the things that always baffles me is how much money we will spend to develop a new infrastructure to exhaust one more resource when if we just paid farmers or basically subsidized farmers to grow topsoil for 3 years and give their soils a time to grow enough water holding capacity so that they could actually hold on to water, that it would cost less money, even in lost yields.
Of course.
And it's paralyzingly frustrating. And I like that you're hopeful that a generation from now, those decision makers are going to flip that script, because it really does. I think it's only our minds that have to change at this point. We have all of these tools that are so much cheaper and easier, and it's incredible that we can't seem to use them.
Yeah, no, of course. But I think the key point, especially for us in France, or maybe I should say in Ardèche, where Ardèche is a very specific place, and by the way, so it's that these kids decided to farm as a life choice. It's so they will be able to get enough money and comfort out of their work because they know how to handle, so they don't have to struggle for life. So they have plenty of time to spend thinking about new solutions. Mm-hmm. But as soon as people can't afford to spend that time, I think whatever we do, it's useless. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I see it very clearly in the Beaujolais, where people, they don't make money except if they are some of the cool winemakers from the natural wine crowd. Otherwise, in the Beaujolais, you don't make money. You sell 1 liter of wine for €1, mm-hmm. roughly. Yeah. And you have 10,000 vines per hectare, and you have to harvest by hand. I mean, and you get €1 for 1 liter.
Yeah, it's hard to make that work.
So these people, they are not open to anything. Mm-hmm. They are just open to any kind of solution that is given to them, and that would be able to save their ass. Mm-hmm. That's it.
Yeah, especially if it comes in a bottle or a bag.
Yes.
If it's a cow walking around the vineyard or growing some vegetables, that's not acceptable.
No, for sure. That's why, again, these kids, this young generation of kids who chose to be farmers, and they are, it's a community. They are exchanging all the solutions they find. We were talking about cedars. They put together this thing called l'atelier paysan, where they realized that all these tools were very expensive, like direct seeders. Mm-hmm. So nobody's buying direct seeders in France now. You make them. Mm. You go for a week in a special places. So they have 5 places in France. You go for a week, you pay like €1,000. You learn how to weld, and then you apply it on drawings of a direct cedar. And at the end of the week, you go back to your place with the cedar.
That's
already
amazing.
Working. So we did that with Martin, my son, 10 years ago for the direct cedar that we have. But so every year they are doing small improvement on the cedar. And now the cedar that they are making is a disc cedar.
That's fantastic.
And so this generation has a lot of imagination, and they are doing collective solutions, and they are smart. Again, they are highly trained. They are smart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how much are your children working with you now, or are they doing their own thing, or both?
Yeah. No. We. So I'm not in charge with the vineyards anymore, except for new plantations, crafting, genetic material selection. Otherwise, all the work is done by my oldest son, Martin. Then we share the crop. He's doing his own wines. I'm doing mine. And Alice, my daughter, who is the like the chief winemaker for the family. She's also doing her own wine, a tiny little amount of wine. She doesn't want to be too much involved into like the commercial aspect of the things.
Mm-hmm.
And she's not working in the vineyards either.
Okay.
So she's really 100% on the winemaking, aging. So yes, I'm now just a winemaker in a way, except during 1 month around the flowering when I'm doing grafting in the vineyard.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. You're doing some interesting work in your vineyards with sort of direct planting of rootstocks and then grafting in the field. Talk about why you're choosing to do things that way, and also things that you maybe are interested in doing as you keep going or just in the future.
So at first it came because I had the dream that I could make a vineyard that would be under natural cover crop, 100%, that I wouldn't touch, maybe with kind of animals in it, maybe sheep or whatsoever. And so the idea was planting a vineyard like in a field, in a grass field, with the cover crop already here.
Yeah.
And we realized very fast that if you would plant grafted plants in a field like this,
they will die.
They have 0% chance of surviving. Yeah. So the first thing that we tried after that was, when I say we, it's because we are a few friends playing around with this.
Okay.
Not specifically people who make wine, by the way. And so we did. So the options that we saw right away was, and what if we plant the rootstock only and leave it like a certain period of time to get the roots done and be healthy, and then graft over later. So we tried with traditional rootstocks that we use in France, especially on the eastern part of France, like 3309. Almost no success.
With 3309?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm surprised.
No, almost none, no.
That's too bad.
And then we talked with people from the Conservatoire de l'Aude. It's a place where they have like 2,000 or 3,000 different type of rootstocks.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. And we talked with two people who are extremely knowledgeable about the history of rootstocks. And they said, okay, we are going to do like a selection of 10, maybe 15 different rootstocks and try with those ones. And so we tried, and some of them were extremely successful. So we were able to grow rootstocks in a like a field of grass, super nice grass. And so we started to graft, I think 3 years later, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years after planting the rootstocks, we did some grafting, and we did many types of grafting techniques, but also types of vinifera that would be grafting over. And again, some rootstocks did well with some vinifera, with some techniques. There is not like one recipe. It's more complicated than that. But what we can say is that we now know 3 or 4 rootstocks that are extremely resistant to competition of the cover crop. They need 5 years to establish. And then with all these rootstocks, you can use, you can graft mostly with the technique of chip bud.
Chip budding.
Yeah. And all the grapes from the family. So I'm talking as a Rhone winemaker, okay, of course. I didn't try like 4,000 different vinifera. So what we tried is mostly Cinsault, Counoise, Picardin family. This is working absolutely amazingly.
That's great.
So we did a lot of experiment about direct plantation of rootstocks, then grafting over on an established cover crop. The result so we started in 2007. So the result is that it's probably not a very good idea if you do a monoculture and if your goal is to harvest, let's say, 45 hectoliters an hectare from a Cinsault or Counoise. The result is that density has to be around 3,000 vines per hectare.
Okay.
So you will make the conversion. So it's probably it's not dense. Huh?
No. It's much wider spacing than traditionally in France.
Yes. So it's about 3,000 is the good balance, and then the yields will be roughly between 25 and 35 hectoliters an hectare, which means that a normal farmer would have to ask around €25 for one bottle of wine. So this is a luxury solution. Still, it's working, okay? So if people are able to ask €25 for a bottle of Cinsault or Counoise, this is something that I would recommend to try, because in terms of resistance to dry conditions, keeping the moisture, whatsoever, it's insanely efficient. But maybe it's a solution for situations drier and hotter and more difficult than the one we have to face in the Northern Rhone.
So in my vineyard, I did. I don't till at all. So we have permanent cover all year round, and I established grafted vines in my vineyard without water and without tillage. And what I found, and we have very different soils than you do, so different starting point, but we don't get any rain between July and September. And what I found is that if I waited an additional 2 years, so instead of waiting 4 years for a grafted vine to produce its first crop, I had to wait 6 years. And in those 6 years, we had, vines that visibly struggled, but that, once we had waited that full 6 years, we were able to have commercial yields that match anything, our neighbors were doing. And in some cases, much higher yields, because they finally were able to access the sort of deeper, water table, and we hold more water because we've got that permanent cover.
Of course.
So water holding capacity. But I think for the region where you are, and frankly, most of France, where those soils have been tilled and organic matter is so low, this method that you're trying, especially the density, which honestly, it's so much easier to work. It's so much easier to work in too, that for vineyards that are going to eventually fail because of climate or because of disease or, some combination of those things, that having this methodology established that works. And honestly, I've always felt that growing rootstocks in place so that they establish their root system before they're asked to ripen whatever we put on top of them, that you always get a better system that way, because the establishment process is just that much more straightforward for the vine. So I think it's brilliant. I think those yields are, do you feel like those yields will get better over time though, because of how much easier it is to integrate?
This was 15 years ago, so I don't think, no. The thing is, again, be careful, I'm talking about Ardèche and Drôme, because we did the same in Beaujolais.
And very different.
There is no problem in Beaujolais.
Right.
Absolutely no problem. The rain is the rain regime is absolutely different. Again, for 9 months this year, we had 3 inches of rain.
Yeah. That's
From
very
January
dry.
to the end of August. So it's extremely dry.
Yeah.
And then usually we get one thing called episode seasonal, that is 8 inches of rain within 2 hours.
God, the big one.
So,
but what if you could hold on to all that water?
That would be no, of course, and definitely plowing. It was part of why I didn't plow anymore in Brezem, is because every year we had this episode seasonal. Usually it was at the end of October, and like 50% of the dirt of the parcel would be down.
Yeah.
And we had to brought it back with the tractor. It was like insane. Yeah, of course. So no, it was not an option. But then again, you could mix a lot of things, because 3000s, if you till a little bit under the rows, it changed a lot of things, and the success rate is much better. And then we discovered something, that instead of planting into the cover crop, what we are doing now is that we keep like 60 centimeters, so 2 feet of where we will use like vegetal tissue.
Oh, like a mulch.
Okay. Yeah. So we use it. We do like we cover the ground. We cover the ground after plowing. So before seeding the cover crop, we cover it. So we do the rows. Then we seed the cover crop. We leave 2 years, 3 years, sometimes, to the cover crop to establish. And then instead of planting the vines straight in the cover crop, we plant it we do just a hole on this vegetal tissue. And we plant the rootstocks on these. And usually they decompose after 3-4 years.
Yeah.
These tissues.
And it's feeding the plant.
And then you get like a much higher success rate on the surviving rootstocks. So the thing is, I think we need to do all these things at different latitude, under different rain season. Yeah, the problem is that a lot of people have been doing some experiments, but it's like randomly, wherever. If you do it in England, you're not going to get the same result that if you do it in the southern part of Spain. And we need to do like collective work.
Yes. Yeah.
To exchange. So instead of fighting for the AOC to stop watering, I will probably spend more time trying to gather people and to exchange experiments about all these things that we probably need to rediscover, because we realize that a lot of things were done before. And so, we need to share all these options and to find what's the best, your place. But I'm pretty confident that, again, the young generation, the people who are in their 20s, 30s now, who are farming, not only vines, by the way, I think the exchange with people who are also dealing with different culture than vines, it's very good. And they are very much into those things. Yeah. Very, very much. So it's really part of their primary concern. So I think we will have results.
Yeah, for sure. And those learning networks, I think, are so critical to just how we're going to adapt in the future. It's been so long since I think growers interacted with each other so intimately, because everybody sort of, there's a lot of work to be done. But when we do step outside and get together and share knowledge, I think it's when we can really also take some courage from each other, because I think a lot of what holds people back is just fear. So when a crazy person has already tried something and it works, I think it helps bring other people along a lot. So
can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Are you using a lot of different types of rootstocks, or? Yeah. Okay. So I think it's also part of things that we have to explore here, because I didn't do that.
It's one of the main limitations, I think, of viticulture right now, is that most of the research has not been on identifying and developing new rootstocks that will actually be able to do, for example, I don't want to use agricultural lime to adjust the pH of my soils. We have very acidic soils. And so working with a native pH that's below 6 and a rootstock that will not just be established in a low pH environment, but that will thrive in a low pH environment. Why we're not trying to do that, I don't know. So yeah, finding enough rootstocks to experiment with was one of my greatest challenges. But I did, kind of like you, if you go to a research station and maybe they have 1 or 2 plants, you can do it very slowly, or but I think that's one of the places we need to have a lot more research is in good rootstocks. And since you opened the door to the phrase natural wine, I'm going to go there. You get categorized as a natural winemaker, even though I think for most of us who make wine, that term can be very polarizing. But, I am a person who would like to make as few interventions as possible in the winery because, very much like what you said, my ultimate goal, or the sort of highest standard I can imagine holding myself to, is the standard of the land. And that's really the voice that I want to bring forth the most. And have you found that the way that you farm and the way that you want to farm lends itself in any particular way? And can you talk about how that helps you make fewer interventions in the winery? Or can you speak to that at all?
The thing is, I've been consulting or helping a lot of people switching from conventional winemaking to, let's say, natural winemaking or low intervention winemaking. And so at the beginning, I didn't choose specifically the people I would work with according to their farming practice. And 10 years later, I refuse to work with people who have like a super interventional practices in the farming, using, even people who are doing like overplowing. So making 0 sulfur, no addition wine with grapes coming from vineyards that are, just assisted vineyard, it's not working.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to face like tons of shit.
Yeah.
Tons. So I'm done. I don't do this anymore. So this is kind of an answer to your question. It's for me doing very low intervention winemaking. It's just possible if you have the best grapes coming from the best vines, and so in the end, coming from the best soil. So if you don't have the best soil, you don't do no intervention. I mean, I can handle a little bit of volatile. I can handle a little bit of funkiness. Why not? But I'm too old, and I'm too probably traditional in a way to drink like orange pet nut with tons of mouse and Brettanomyces. So that's it. I mean, so if you don't care, yes, you probably can do low intervention winemaking with shitty grapes. But if you do care, it's impossible. And even I've been working with people who were really careful about what they were doing, but for them, it was going too far to seed under between the rows. It was going too far to okay. And in the end, though they were practicing some kind of organic viticulture, the result in terms of grapes was not up to the standard that I need to have to be able to do like no sulfur, no addition, no inoculation wine.
Yeah, I've definitely found that the sort of redox potential is one of the biggest improvements as your soil gets stronger and as your grapes are really able to ripen the full suite of secondary plant metabolites. That reductive strength of the wine, it goes so far in the winery. I mean, in terms of making investments in what you do, I still, with all the tools you could possibly have as a winemaker, the biggest investment you can make is in your soil. I really believe that. So if there's something that you wish I had asked, but I haven't asked yet, or if there's something that you wish you could share with a big audience, these aren't just wine people. These are mostly, other types of farmers. And it's a big audience. So if there's anything that you wish we had talked about, but we haven't quite covered, I just give you the mic.
No, if there is one thing, generally speaking, I think everything that we've talked about, all the solutions that we can find, I think we don't lack solutions or things for the future that we could do. I think the main problem that we have to face right now in general is that the people don't pay, or that don't want to pay the real cost of a real agricultural product that is made artisanally by real people. So I think as farmers, if we can do something, and all the people who are buying our wines or buying fresh food from real farmers, we need to educate around us people so they can spend as much money they spend on iPhones or shit like this. Because as soon as any farmer in the world get enough money to feed his or her family, to educate the kids, to have a house that is warm enough during winter, I mean, farmers will always find solutions. The problem is that right now, too much farmers are just running in a direction they don't even know, just because they can't stop running.
Yeah.
And this is a real pity. I mean, so this is the one message I would say. We should educate everyone around ourselves to real agricultural products, and that they have a cost, and it's not a badly spent money to pay quite an extra bit of money to have a real product in your plate or in your glass or whatsoever, and to help farmers to be able to face all the problems that we will have to face. Because right now, each time people, and in France, people buy wine in supermarket, and when you buy a bottle of wine at €3, they don't realize that by buying a bottle of wine of this kind, mostly what they are doing is that they are pushing the farmers behind this bottle towards solutions that are not solutions.
Yeah.
So hopefully people will turn to a better appreciation of what the real farming is and what is the cost of real farming.
What do you think? I mean, I really hope you have an answer to this question. What do you think works? And have you had good success? Because for me, I think one of the things about wine is that people will give the stage to a winemaker in a way that other farmers don't get that audience, they don't get that attention. And so I try really hard to, when I have that stage or that platform, to talk about how food matters to what our world looks like. It's everything. But have you found a way that really works to get at that big problem that you point out, which is, our biggest obstacle is changing people's minds? And what do you think is what works?
So I will go back to Ardèche, and you have to come to Ardèche once.
Yes, I would love to visit you there.
So the Ardèche has always been a very weird place in France because it's a remote place with high mountains, and it's very difficult to drive from one point to another. So since almost the Roman times, but especially at the period of the Révocation de l'Édit de Nantes, so where the Protestants in France were not allowed anymore after being allowed. Most of the Protestants had to leave France, but some of them went to Ardèche in a place called Les Cévennes. It's a very remote place. It's 1,000 meters of altitude, and they managed to survive there for generations. In 1968, when there was all these, student revolutions in France, people moved from Paris to Ardèche. And now, because of, the modern world, the way it works, a lot of young kids, well-educated, as the Protestants were, by the way, back then, or the people from 1968, are moving back to Ardèche, and they are beginning to be farmers. And the solution they found to the problem that you are pointing out is that they are doing everything collective. So you don't meet winemakers. If they do something like, like a tasting, you will find people making goat cheese, people doing potatoes, people growing olive trees, whatever. And in the end, I think even people like me who are very wine focused, you spend more time talking to people who are doing chestnut paste than people who are making wine, because you already know a lot about wine. So maybe you have a much better time talking to people who are doing chestnut paste because you don't know shit about chestnut paste. And it's quite funny to see that these kind of events that they are doing that are quite collective, and like you feel the power of farmers. There are only farmers there, girls, boys, whatever age, nobody cares, colors. They are farmers here, and they are doing an event as farmers, and the people who are coming to this event, they are here to understand what is farming. So they have this manifestation. One is called the Ferme en Ferme. It's like a huge thing. It's Martin's girlfriend. She has a farm and she's doing goat cheese. And they have, over the weekend, they have more than 2,000 people coming to the farm.
That's amazing. Yeah.
You see? And so I think this is what one of these solution is probably something that we were not able to do. My generation, we are doing wine tasting where people come to taste only wine. They taste like 2,000 wines in a weekend.
Right. And they remember every one of them.
Yeah, so maybe instead of all these fancy winemaking, wine tasting that we have been doing for years, we should do farmers tastings.
Amen.
And be all together. The people who are making cheese, who are growing potatoes, and speak all together, and not being like, only the winemakers on this side, only the farmers.
I love it. I love your vision. Yes. Well, Eric, it has been such a pleasure to talk to you, and I would love it if you would just give us a little taste of how you feel about the vintage so far.
It's difficult to say because I was expecting like very modern in terms of climate.
Right.
Vintage, so like big wines, a bit like 2019, big wines, probably not my style. But in the end, it's absolutely not the case.
Interesting.
So because of these rains, almost 8 inches of rain that we had end of August, just beginning of September, the vintage changed totally. So now we are more on something subtle, not really big wines. Again, this is about Ardèche and Rome at the middle of the Rhône, and because it's not the same thing in Châteauneuf-du-Pape, and probably not the same thing in the extreme northern Rhône. I know it's not the same in Jura or in Beaujolais. So for the middle Rhône Valley, it's quite a balanced, subtle vintage with wines that have nothing to do with the image I had in my mind at the end of July. So I'm not able to answer your question now. I'm a bit too surprised by the wines to really be able to make my mind. For the whites, at least, for Clairette and Roussanne, I think it should be amazing. For the reds, I'm still, we'll see.
I feel like I never know until 2 years after the wine's been bottled.
No, this is true. Yeah. But honestly, we were expecting something like 03 or 09 or 2019. So a really big wines. And it's absolutely not what we have now. So, we'll see.
It's so interesting. Just quickly, one of the things I want to make sure we say is, in my experience, not tilling and having permanent cover in my vineyard, in 2013, we had a very, very hot summer. And then just as the grapes were almost ripe, when we were within about a week of picking, and so this would have been end of August for us, very early, we got an atmospheric river. So we got about 7 inches of rain in 10 days. And one of the things that happened is in vineyards that had been plowing, to give more moisture to their vines or whatever, that water was taken up so quickly by the vines that their berries split. And so disease became a problem.
Sure,
and it's one of the biggest benefits of having permanent cover is being able to buffer that amount of rain, because we always get rain in the fall. I mean, we do. In October, we can be guaranteed that we're going to start getting some good rains. So it's one of the things that I really appreciated in that year was just that it was able to absorb that water, and we were able to hang for a long time after that to sort of dry out and get those flavors. But it's it's really hard when the vines pull up all that water and then they split and botrytis starts to set in.
Well, I don't know if you agree, but I think that once you found the right species that you have to grow in your cover crop, the good pace of renewing it, I see absolutely no problem of having like a cover crop 100% of your surface. Honestly, I don't see what kind of problem it would be. I still don't see.
Yeah.
Okay. So people shouldn't be shy, but we talked about that before. I mean, this when people don't want to go for it, either they have the money and they are probably people who have different consideration than a farmer would have, or they don't have they can pay the luxury price to be smart.
Yeah, the risk mitigation.
Yeah, the risk, and also even spending a bit of time thinking about it.
Yeah,
I think sometimes it's too much for them.
It's
honestly,
huge, yeah.
and it's again so back to pay the real price for artisanal real farming products, because as soon as people get a bit enough money from it, they will have time and the mind to think about all these things.
Yeah.
Right now, I see a lot of people around me that they can't afford to be that smart.
Yeah, they can't stop for a second to even think about what they
have to be stupid in a way, and efficient, not dreamers, like they say. Very often, you probably hear this very often. No, dreamers, you are dreamers. Okay.
Yeah, I've heard that.
But I think these people can't afford to have dreams.
Yeah.
In a way. So now when there are billionaires who came to make wine just for fun, it's a different story. But this is not the main problem. The main problem, again, the AOCs, watering or not, people who are asking for this, if they are billionaires, who cares? The problem is, it's not these people, it's the people who are struggling, who are asking for watering in AOCs.
Yeah.
It's a different story.
Very different. Well, what a wonderful opportunity to speak with you for so long today. Thank you so much for spending all this time with me. And I really look forward to tasting the wines from this vintage. I think they should be super exciting. And I've always enjoyed, I think you have a very pure approach to what you do. And even though I think you step outside of, sort of some of the traditional constructs, if you taste your wines, there is a romantic's heart in there. Those wines have tenderness and just a real sort of perennial beauty that I think a lot of wines just don't have. And so I feel very privileged to have had so much of your time today. And please give my best to your family. And I really look forward to visiting you and the Ardèche. I would really love to go see that. Well, thank you.
Next time I'm around your place, I will make sure that Josefa brings me to you.
She better. I'll make sure she knows that. Well, Eric, thanks again so much. And I wish you the best with the finishing pressing off your wines. And I look forward to harvesting a few of my own eventually.
Yeah, I hope you will have a great harvest. Probably.
We will. I mean, it's always good. It's never what you think it's going to be.
Of course.
Yeah. All right. Well, you have a wonderful night. Thank you so much for your time.
Au revoir. À bientôt.
So there you have it. No bullshit with Eric Texier. Isn't he awesome? I had such a good time speaking with Eric, and I remember when he came to my family's estate, and we talked a lot about farming at the time, and he remembers me being vigorous in my opinions, and I remember him being similarly vigorous in his opinions. So we were well met indeed, and today was a really fun reunion speaking together again. I would really like to thank the gentlemen standards at the No-Till Growers Market Garden Podcast, Farmer Jesse, Mr. Jackson, and Dr. Professor, who is some kind of a legend, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, thanks, dudes. It's been real fun. I can't highly recommend enough to all of you listeners out there to swindle your way into being a guest host on a podcast, because then you get to talk to all the people that you've ever admired and want to pick their brain and steal all their secrets and do cool things. So anyway, that's why I'm here, and really, really enjoying myself. Adios.
Hey, you all, Farmer Jesse here, just jumping in real quick to catch you up on some of what we have going on. The next conference, since it's conference season, I will be taking part in, will be the Organic Association of Kentucky Conference, also known as OAK, in late January, the 26th through the 28th of January, to be precise. Come say hi. That should be a lot of fun. It's not far from here. It's in Frankfort, Kentucky. Tickets are on sale now, obviously, and we, no-till growers, will have a booth there. Have you checked out the new No-Till Growers Forum yet? We're up over like 850 members or something, and growing like fast. Would love to have you join us to chat about everything from soil management to farm business strategies, talk tools or sell tools, post classifieds for job or land opportunities, whatever you want. You can find the forum at no-tillgrowers.com. We will also put a link in the show notes. Also, like everything that we do, the forum is free and open to the public. If you'd like to support our work, you can pick up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook at no-tillgrowers.com, or one of the no-till hats, which are back in stock. The proceeds from those sales at no-tillgrowers.com go to making you more content. Or lastly, you can always become a Patreon member at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where not only may you get discounts on our stuff, but at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs this week to these amazing folks, Bill Altman and Stephen Smith. Thank you to everyone who supports our show in whatever way that you can. And that's it for me. Thanks, y'all. We'll see you next week. Bye.